Let's revise on two concepts, the rate of return of an asset and short selling. Let's start with rate of return. Suppose there is a stock or share. How can you compute the rate of return on that stock? Let's denote the rate of return by R. And let's say today it's date T, and date T plus 1 is, let's say, 1 month from today. The rate of return on the asset that realizes at date T plus 1 is defined as the right-hand side of this equation. PT plus 1 is date T plus 1 price, and DT plus 1 is the amount of dividend that is paid per share, and that's paid at date T plus 1. You sum these two up and divide by today's price, PT. And in the end, you subtract 1. If you don't, then it's called gross return. If you subtract 1, then it's called a net return. Okay? So this is the definition of the rate of return on asset. Very often we simply say return. But even if we say return, we mean rate of return. It is important that you include both the capital gain from the price change and income gain from dividend. Now, how can we compute return on a portfolio? Portfolio is composed of more than one asset. How can we compute a return on a portfolio? Suppose you have £100 and suppose you invest 50% of your money in stock A, 25% of your money in stock B, and the rest in stock C. What is the return on your portfolio? Let's denote by P, the portfolio. The return of portfolio is calculated by the following equation or formula. Basically, it's the weighted average of the individual returns on stock A, stock B, stock C, where the weights are your portfolio weights, 50%, 25%, and 25%. To understand why this equation holds, let's look at a simple numerical example. Suppose the returns on stocks A, B, and C turn out 5%, 20%, and minus 10% respectively. So the price of stock C actually drops. To make our story simple, let's assume that there is no dividend payment during this period. Or equivalently, let's assume that whenever you receive dividends from a stock, you automatically reinvest that money in buying the same stock. Now, you started with £100 and invested £50, £25, and £25 in stocks A, B, and C. The realized returns are 5%, 20%, and minus 10% respectively. So, for stock A, for example, now the total value is £52.5. You originally invested £50, but you got 5% return, so it's now 5% higher, which is £52.5. Similarly, you originally invested £25 in the stocks of company B. The realized return was 20%, so now the total value of the stocks of company B you own is £30, 20% higher. Unfortunately, for stock C, the price dropped, so the realized return was negative 10%. The total value of stocks of company C you own is now £22.5, 10% lower than the originally invested amount. So, 1 month later, the value of your portfolio is what? The sum of these three numbers, 52.5 plus 30 plus 22.5 equal 105 pounds. You originally invested 100 pounds. Now your portfolio is worth 105 pounds. So the return on your portfolio is 5%. Okay? Now let's check that we can get the same number using this formula for the return on a portfolio. According to this formula, the return on a portfolio is just the weighted average of the returns of individual assets where the weights are the portfolio weights. That is the weight for stock A, 50%, times the return on stock A, 5%, the weight for stock B, 25%, the return on stock B, 20%, the weight for stock C, 25%, and the return on stock C, minus 10%, equal 0.05, 5%. Okay? So we got the same number. So the important points on this slide are the definition of the return, rate of return, and the formula for the return on portfolio.